Hey everyone, I'm Bob, aka Japan So Far. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking all about why I decided to leave the military after 14 years. So if you're on the fence and trying to decide whether or not you should stay in the military, watch this video because the insight I give may help you to make your decision. Now, before I start this video, let me just say that my overall experience in the Air Force was positive. I'm not here to complain about what an awful time I had or how bad I had it, or that I didn't get a fair shake or something like that. I was extremely fortunate to get to do a lot of the things that I did in the military. I got some great job experience. I got my education paid for all the way through my MBA. I got to travel and work in over a dozen countries. I met some really great people and mentors, and I got to see and do a lot of amazing things during my 14 years. But I'd gotten to the point where I felt like I'd gotten everything I needed to out of my service, and I was starting to feel really stuck where I was. My enlistment was coming to an end, and there were things happening in the Air Force that I really didn't agree with. And I know that if I had stayed in, that would have meant giving up some really valuable years of my life, letting opportunities pass me by, and that I would not be living up to my full potential. The Air Force was not going to let me do things that I felt like I wanted to or needed to do, and it was really like a YOLO moment for me. Does anyone even say that anymore? A lot of people didn't think I was actually going to get out of the military because I had been in so long, but I did. And in this video, I'm going to explain why. But before we get into all that, if you're new here, I'm Bob, aka Japan So Far. Like I said, I make videos about my career in consulting, living abroad here in Japan, videos about travel, shopping, and a lot of other fun stuff. So if you feel like any of that content would be interesting to you, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to check me out on Instagram. So probably the main factor driving my decision to get out of the Air Force is that I had the opportunity to work in a different career, and that is what I do now. Consulting. Consulting is a career field that I was trying to get into ever since I was an undergrad, and I had the opportunity to do it. It was coinciding with when my enlistment ended, and I knew that if I said no to that, it would be a long time before that opportunity came again, if at all. And although this opportunity was one of the main factors in me getting out, there were some other things going on in the Air Force, like I mentioned, that kind of helped push me in the direction of getting out, aside from having this opportunity to work in a new career. The main one being that my leadership in the Air Force was not willing to help me out with family issues. So going back here, this is kind of a long story, but going back to 2016, my wife and I noticed that my son, who was 1.5 at the time, was not behaving like other children, not hitting those milestones that he needed to, and we thought maybe he was autistic, and we wanted to get him some help right away. So the first thing I did was I went to TRICARE. I told them what was going on, and I was told by TRICARE that they will not diagnose a child with autism before 3 years old. 3 was the absolute earliest that they would give a diagnosis of autism. For those of you that don't know, TRICARE is the military's health insurance provider. Without that diagnosis, there was not a lot that we could do for him through TRICARE. We wanted to get him help right away, of course. So he is a Japanese citizen. He has dual citizenship, right? He's American and Japanese. My wife is Japanese. So she was able to get him into Japanese programs and get him a diagnosis of autism at the age of 2. So we were able to get him into these Japanese programs, therapies, things like that, a year or earlier before we would have been able to do that going through the military. When it came time for us to PCS out of Japan, about a year before it was time for us to PCS out of Japan, actually, I went to my command. I asked them if there's anything they can do. Could I get a base in Japan that's close to my wife and her family, so that if I have to TAD, TDY, deploy, something like that, that my wife would be able to get assistance from her parents and her sisters. And I was told no. And I said, well, can I do a remote assignment so that my wife and child can stay here and my son can continue his therapy? For those of you that don't know, in the Air Force, if you do a remote assignment, then you're eligible to get a base of preference when you leave that remote assignment. And I would have tried to get a base of preference either back here to Okinawa, where we were at the time and where I currently am now, or I would have tried to have gotten a base stateside close to my family, even though that would have meant my son leaving his programs that were in Japanese and having to switch to an English program, which would not have been good for him, but at least my family would have been there to help us out if I had to do something for the military and not be available to help my wife. But I was told no to that as well. So when I was looking at the assignments for when I was leaving Japan, the only option that I had was to a base in Texas, and my command was not willing to help me out. And after, 13 years at the time of, going where the Air Force wanted me to, despite what I had going on in my life, I went where they told me, when they told me, and I didn't complain about it. And once I'm asking the Air Force to do something for me, to help me out, and they were not willing to do that. At least my leadership here in Japan was not. And that really bothered me. I'd seen my leadership here do things for people in similar situations. Of course, those were for stateside bases, so maybe that was a little easier to manage. But still, like, I just got told no. Like, they didn't even try. And that, that really bothered me. That did not sit with me right. And that kind of leads me into the next point of why I decided to leave the Air Force, and that is bad and ineffective leadership. Leadership in the Air Force was making a lot of decisions about the future of the enlisted force that I really did not agree with. If we wanted to get promoted out of the rank of E6 to E7, they were requiring us to do a lot of coursework, and this coursework did not get you any college credit, did not get you any professional certifications. It was just a lot of time invested on something that was self-mandated. There was really no benefit to you once you left the military to complete this large amount of coursework. And it was just one extra responsibility that on top of your already growing list of responsibilities and obligations that you had. And speaking of the new promotion system, I'm talking about promoting from E6 to E7. They got rid of the testing aspect of that. So the promotion was board only. And boards are very subjective. They don't take into accountability any individual or life circumstances that may have occurred. Some people had supervisors that were much better at writing packages and performance reports than others. So depending on, how your supervision wrote packages and awards for you, that was also a big factor in whether or not you would have a successful board score when you went to get promoted. A lot of senior leadership in the Air Force, talking senior enlisted leadership here, they were just watching the clock till they could hit that retirement button. They were in a position of a lot of responsibility, but they kind of didn't take that responsibility seriously. At least that was my observation before I left. Another big weakness I saw with Air Force leadership was not being honest and direct with their commanders. There's definitely a culture in the Air Force of telling commanders what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. And if there is ever a situation where commanders are told what they need to hear, then it's a case where the cat's already out of the bag and the commander is going to find out anyway. Most of the time, issues were minimized or glossed over, and it was kind of a self-preservation mechanism, right? So leadership, they're not going to want to go to the commander and make it look like they can't handle things or they can't do their job or they don't have a handle on their own responsibilities. But all it really did was create a cycle of things being swept under the rug and things never getting any better for the junior enlisted force and those mid-tier NCOs, E5s and E6s. And a lot of these issues were really simple things that just a little bit of technology or maybe a little bit of personnel realignment could fix. But leadership did not want to do the work to figure out, what exactly those solutions are. A lot of the times they would just ask to have money thrown at the problem. But if you don't have the right plan and the right people in place, throwing more money at a problem isn't really going to do anything. There was also a lot of, higher level leadership doing a lot of passing the buck and skirting responsibility, right? I was kind of seeing a culture in the Air Force where no one wanted to accept things. No one wanted to accept responsibility for things because responsibility is a liability and liabilities are risk, obviously, and risk could affect someone's promotion. So you had senior leadership engaging in the exact same behavior that they were telling their airmen and NCOs not to do. And people would say, Bob, why don't you stop complaining and be part of the solution? Which brings me to my next point, barriers to promotion. At the rank I was, an E6, people simply were just not going to listen to what I had to say. But like I mentioned before, promotions to senior NCO level were senior NCO, senior non-commissioned officer, for those of you that are outside the military. Promotion to those ranks were very unpredictable, right? It all depended on the board score, what went into your package, how good your supervisors wrote performance reviews and awards, and a number of other factors. So going back to that a little bit here, what did you have the opportunity to do during those last 3 years or however many performance reports were in your package that were getting looked at for that year? Maybe you didn't have the opportunity to deploy. Maybe you were at a base where they didn't deploy that much. Maybe you didn't have the opportunity to go TDY. The opportunities are not evenly distributed throughout the Air Force, and a lot of that is not considered when people are looking at packages and considering who's going to get promoted to that next rank and who isn't. I also looked at the officer track. That was not an impossible thing to do, but it was going to be really difficult, especially with me being an E6. The higher in rank you are, the more justification there has to be to give up your enlisted position when you're trying to be an officer. I had tried that. I'd put a lot of work into putting a package together for officer school, but that was really going nowhere, and I couldn't get the support I needed from leadership on that, because they said that with my rank and how long I'd been in, I had a very low chance of getting selected. Another big reason for me getting out was work-life balance. In my role in the Air Force, the job I was doing at the time, being a resource manager, resource advisor, it was a one-person deep position. I didn't have any support, and I was always on the hook for something. One example, I remember I'd worked a really long week. I'd been working like 13, 14-hour days, Tuesday through Friday, and our commander had told everyone that Friday, how important work-life balance was, and make sure you spend time with your family, et cetera, et cetera. And then that Saturday, me and my family are out at a Christmas event. We're there like 5 minutes. I get a call. I have to go in the office to take care of something. And I ended up being in the office that night till like 9 o'clock. Yes, leadership did give me that time back, right? So I got a day off that next week. But my wife was at school. My son was at preschool. So even though I got the time back, I still didn't get to spend that with my family, right? And that's the point. I was never really able to plan anything with my family. And this wasn't a one-time thing. This happened quite a bit, but that's just one example. Now, I didn't complain at the time. I was enlisted. I did my job. I did my mission. That's what I was there to do. But a lot of the times where I was having to come in on weekends or late nights or whatever, it was due to leadership having really poor planning. I would have to come in, save the day, change diapers, and clean up everyone's mess. Again, let me just reiterate. I know after all that, the Air Force is probably like, geez, Bob, tell me how you really feel. And this is how I really feel. I actually really did, despite all that, enjoy my time in the military. Like I said, I got a lot out of it. I wasn't bitter or upset when I left. It's just simply my enlistment was over and I wanted to move on with my life and do something else. I was happy to serve. I'm glad that I served, and I'm glad that I served in the Air Force, right? I think that's probably the best branch of the military that you can serve in, and they're also probably the most selective branch of the military. I got in the Air Force, and when I was in the Air Force, I got to work with some really good people. Not all of leadership is like this. There's some great leadership in the Air Force. There's some great people in the Air Force. There's some people in leadership in the Air Force trying to do some really great things that really, really care about the airmen and the NCOs below them. Unfortunately, those are usually the ones that aren't listened to. Those are usually the ones that don't get promoted into the highest ranks. And ultimately, I felt like I didn't want to be a part of an organization that didn't value that. The decision to get out of the military, whether you're enlisted or an officer, is very personal. It takes a lot of time, a lot of planning, a lot of consideration. It's really about you and what you want to do with your life. So don't take the decision lightly. My advice would be to not get out of the military before you've got some really great accomplishments and have done some self-improvement, because those are some very invaluable things that you can take with you when you leave. Well, everyone, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment down below. Let me know what you thought of this video. Was your Air Force or military experience similar? And if you're getting out of the military, comment down below and let me know why, and if this video helped you to make your decision. That's all for me. Really, again, I appreciate everyone watching, and I will see you all in the next one.